The first child dropped his silver spoon. The second whispered, "He came." And before anyone in the breakfast room could stop them, both children were running. Not toward their mother. Not toward the old earl whose anniversary had brought half the county to Belgrave Hall. They were running toward a stranger who had not yet crossed the threshold. A stranger whose carriage had only just appeared beyond the iron gates. 7-year-old Elias reached the front steps first. His sister, Clara, was a breath behind him. And when the tall gentleman descended from the black carriage, both children stopped so suddenly that Clara nearly collided with her brother. For several seconds, nobody moved. The gentleman wore a charcoal traveling coat. Rain had darkened one shoulder. His black hair had been pushed carelessly from his forehead by the wind, and irritation remained on his face from a journey delayed twice by broken roads. But it was not his coat that made the children stare. It was his face. Clara covered her mouth. Elias went pale. Then the boy ran forward. "Papa!" The gentleman froze. Elias threw both arms around his waist. Clara followed. And somewhere behind them, a porcelain cup shattered. The stranger looked down at 2 children clinging to him. 2 children he had never seen in his life. 2 children with his dark hair, his gray eyes, his sharp brows, even the small crooked smile that appeared on Clara's face when she finally looked up at him was unmistakably his. For the first time in 10 years, Adrian Vale, Duke of Westmere, forgot how to speak. Then Clara said something even worse. "You took so long." Adrian slowly looked toward the entrance of Belgrave Hall. A dozen servants stood motionless. His uncle, the Earl of Belgrave, had appeared behind them. And beside the Earl stood a woman in a pale green morning dress. She was staring at Adrian as if she had just watched a man rise from a grave. Adrian did not know her, but she knew him. He could see that immediately. Her hands had gone rigid at her sides. Her face had lost its color. And when Elias shouted over his shoulder, "Mama, look, he really came back," the woman closed her eyes, only for a second. But Adrian saw it, and suddenly the rain, the journey, and the anniversary celebration no longer mattered. Something was wrong at Belgrave Hall, something involving him, and everyone seemed to know it except the Duke himself. 3 hours earlier, Adrian had almost turned the carriage around. He disliked family celebrations. He especially disliked celebrations where elderly relatives spent 6 hours reminding unmarried men that their bloodline was apparently in mortal danger. His uncle Frederick had been married to Lady Margaret for 40 years. 40 years. An achievement Uncle Frederick had mentioned in every letter for the previous 3 months. "You ought to come," he had written. "It may remind you that life consists of more than estates, parliamentary debates, and refusing invitations." Adrian had nearly sent his regrets. At 32, the Duke of Westmere had become remarkably skilled at avoiding gatherings where marriageable daughters somehow appeared beside his chair at dinner. But Frederick Vale was different. He had been more father than uncle to Adrian, after Adrian's own father died. So Adrian came. He expected speeches, champagne, awful music, possibly a country dance from which escape would be impossible. He did not expect 2 children to call him Papa. Release his grace. The woman in green had finally found her voice. Elias stiffened. Clara immediately tightened her grip on Adrian. "Clara." Her mother's tone sharpened. The little girl reluctantly stepped back. Elias did not. Adrian looked at the boy. Up close, the resemblance was even more disturbing. There was a tiny mark beside Elias's left eyebrow. Adrian touched the same place on his own face without thinking. His scar was nearly invisible now. A childhood fall from a horse. Surely coincidence. It had to be coincidence. "Elias," the woman said. The boy finally released Adrian. He looked confused, then embarrassed. "You look like him," he whispered. Adrian's gaze shifted immediately. "Like whom?" Silence. The old earl stepped forward. "My dear boy." "Uncle." Frederick embraced him rather too enthusiastically. It was the embrace of a man attempting to prevent a conversation. Adrian knew his uncle well enough to recognize it. "You have grown thin. I saw you 6 months ago. You were thin then too. Who are these children?" Frederick pretended not to hear. "Your aunt is in the West Garden directing flowers as if Britain's survival depends upon roses. She will be delighted you arrived." "Uncle, breakfast? Who are the children?" Frederick's smile disappeared. Behind him, the woman in green lowered her gaze. Adrian looked from one to the other, then back at the twins. Elias was still staring at him. Clara had moved closer to her mother, but kept peering around her skirt. Adrian repeated the question, this time quietly. "Who are they?" The woman answered, "My children." Her voice was controlled now. Adrian studied her. She was perhaps 28. Brown hair arranged simply. No jewels except a small pearl pendant. A widow, judging from the narrow black ribbon around one wrist, a provincial custom Adrian had seen in northern counties. "And you are?" "Mrs. Evelyn Hart." Something in Frederick's face changed when she said the name. Adrian noticed. He noticed everything now. "Have we met, Mrs. Hart?" "No." Too quickly. Adrian's eyes narrowed. "You are certain?" Her chin lifted. "I believe I would remember meeting the Duke of Westmere." Elias suddenly spoke. "But you have his picture." Evelyn turned. The entire hall seemed to contract. "What picture?" Adrian asked. Elias looked at his mother. Clara tried to help. "The one upstairs." Evelyn's face changed. "Clara, the one Mama keeps inside the blue book." "Enough." "But it looks exactly like Clara." The little girl stopped. Adrian did not. "What picture?" Evelyn looked directly at him now, and something astonishing happened. The fear left her face. Not because she had become less frightened, because she had decided something. Whatever secret existed here, Evelyn Hart had apparently decided she would rather fight the Duke of Westmere than explain it. "It is a private possession. Bearing my likeness?" "I did not say that." "Your daughter did." "My daughter is 6. 7. Clara corrected. Evelyn closed her eyes briefly. Adrian might have laughed under different circumstances. He did not. Frederick cleared his throat. "Adrian, perhaps we should speak privately." "Yes," Adrian said. Evelyn's shoulders relaxed. Then Adrian added, "After I see the picture." Her shoulders became rigid again. No, it was not the refusal itself that surprised him. It was the certainty. Very few people said no to Adrian Vale so cleanly. "I beg your pardon? You are a guest in this house, Your Grace. You may ask me questions. You may think whatever you wish, but you will not enter my rooms and search my possessions merely because 2 children were startled by your appearance." Adrian stared at her. Frederick muttered, "Oh dear." Adrian ignored him. "Your son called me Papa. He made a mistake. Your daughter says you own my portrait. She says it resembles you. Is there a difference?" "Yes." "What difference?" Evelyn hesitated. Just long enough. Adrian saw it. "There is a difference," she repeated. Elias tugged her sleeve. "Mama?" "Not now." "But he doesn't know." Evelyn looked sharply down at him. That sentence changed Adrian's expression. "What don't I know?" Nobody answered. "What?" Adrian repeated. "Don't I know?" Elias opened his mouth. Evelyn placed one hand on his shoulder. "Go upstairs with your sister." "But, now." The twins reluctantly obeyed. Clara climbed 3 steps before turning. She stared at Adrian again. Then she said, "You even stand the same way." Evelyn went completely still. Adrian felt something cold settle in his stomach. "The same way as whom?" Clara looked at her mother. At the Earl. Then at Adrian. The man in Mama's picture. And she disappeared upstairs. Frederick summoned a servant. "Take Mrs. Hart to the conservatory. I can find it myself," Evelyn said. She walked away without looking at Adrian. He waited until she disappeared beyond the corridor. Then he turned on his uncle. "Library." Frederick sighed. "Adrian. Now." The library doors had scarcely closed before Adrian spoke. "Who is she?" A widow. I gathered that. She has lived at Belgrave for almost 5 years. Why? She assists your aunt. With what? Correspondence, accounts, village affairs. And her children live here with her. Adrian stared. Frederick suddenly became extremely interested in arranging papers on his desk. 5 years, Adrian said. You have employed a woman with 2 children who resemble me so strongly that half your household stopped breathing when I arrived, and you never thought to mention them? Frederick looked up. I had hoped the resemblance had diminished. Adrian actually laughed. Once. Without humor. You hoped? They were younger when they came. Children generally become older, uncle. I am aware. Who was their father? Frederick said nothing. There. Adrian felt it. The first truly dangerous silence. Who was their father? I promised I would not answer that question. To whom? Another silence. Adrian approached the desk. To Mrs. Hart? Yes. Why would the identity of her husband concern me? Frederick sat down. He suddenly looked older than he had minutes before. Because Evelyn was never married. Adrian stopped. The room seemed strangely quiet. Outside the tall windows, rain traced silver lines down the glass. Then why is she called Mrs. Hart? To protect the children. From whom? From everyone. Adrian shook his head slowly. No, do not turn this into one of your moral lectures about gossiping villages. Those children ran directly to me, not because I am vaguely similar to some unknown man. The boy called me Papa before I had spoken a word. Frederick rubbed one hand over his face. They have seen a miniature. Of their father? Yes. And he looks like me. Frederick did not answer. Adrian's voice dropped. Who is he? I cannot tell you. You cannot? I gave my word. To Evelyn? Yes. Why would you promise a woman I have never met that you would hide the name of a man who looks exactly like me? Frederick rose abruptly. The anniversary guests will begin arriving before noon. Adrian stared at him in disbelief. You cannot possibly think we are discussing table arrangements after this. I think some things are not mine to reveal. Then perhaps Mrs. Hart will reveal them. She will not. You sound very certain. I am. Then I shall convince her. Frederick stepped around the desk. And for the first time since Adrian had entered the library, his uncle looked genuinely frightened. Leave her alone. Adrian paused. Frederick had never spoken to him like that. Not once. Why? Because she has suffered enough. I am not threatening her. Your presence may be threat enough. Adrian's anger vanished. Not completely, but something else replaced it. Confusion. Why would my presence threaten her? Frederick looked toward the window. I knew this day might come. What day? The day you saw those children. You invited me here. I did. Knowing they were here. Yes. Then perhaps you wanted this day to come. Frederick turned. Adrian saw the truth before he heard it. His uncle had not made a mistake. He had engineered this. The anniversary. The invitation. Adrian's arrival. The children. All of it. You wanted me to see them, Adrian said. Frederick slowly sat down. I wanted something to happen that I have lacked the courage to do myself. Adrian's pulse changed. What? For you to ask questions. Adrian stared at him. Then answer them. I cannot. You summoned me here so I would discover a mystery you refuse to explain. Frederick gave a tired smile. Your father used to say you could not leave a locked door unopened. My father said many irritating things. He was usually correct. Adrian turned away, frustrated. Then his attention landed on something above the fireplace. A family portrait. His grandfather. His father. Frederick. 3 generations of Vale men. The same dark hair. The same eyes. The same severe mouth. Adrian stared at it. A simple explanation occurred to him. Perhaps the children belonged to some distant Vale cousin. Some scandal Frederick had concealed. But that would not explain Evelyn's terror. Or the hidden miniature. or why the boy had called him Papa. Then Adrian noticed something. There should have been 4 boys in the old family portrait. He had seen earlier sketches. His father had once mentioned it. A younger brother who died in infancy. But in the finished painting, only 3 brothers appeared. Adrian frowned. Uncle. Frederick looked up. My father had another brother. Frederick's expression became unreadable. Edmund. He died as a baby. Yes. When? Why are you asking? Because suddenly I find myself interested in forgotten members of this family. Frederick turned pale. Adrian saw it, and his heart began beating faster. What does Edmund have to do with Mrs. Hart? Nothing. That was a very poor lie. Adrian. When did he die? Before you were born. How? Illness. Where is he buried? Frederick stared at him. Adrian waited. No answer. Where is Edmund buried? Your grandmother handled the arrangements. That was not my question. Frederick walked to the drinks table and poured water he did not drink. Adrian watched him. Every instinct he possessed now screamed that the children upstairs were only the surface of something much older. Something that had begun before Adrian himself was born. A knock sounded. The butler entered. My lord, forgive the interruption. Frederick almost looked relieved. What is it? A delivery has arrived for Mrs. Hart. Give it to her. The messenger insists his grace should see it. Adrian turned. Me? Yes, your grace. Who sent it? The gentleman refused to give his name. Frederick's glass slipped slightly in his hand. Adrian noticed. Bring it. The butler returned moments later carrying a narrow wooden box. No crest. No sender. Only one line written across the lid. For Adrian Vale. Adrian opened it. Inside lay an old silver pocket watch. He knew it immediately. His father had owned one exactly like it. But his father's watch was locked in a cabinet at Westmere House. Adrian lifted this one. The initials engraved on the back were not his father's. E.V. Edmund Vale. Beneath the watch lay a folded note. Adrian opened it. Frederick crossed the room. What does it say? Adrian read the first line, then the second, then looked slowly at his uncle. You told me Edmund died as a baby. Frederick said nothing. Adrian handed him the note. There were only 11 words. Edmund Vale did not die, and those children are not the greatest secret. Frederick's face collapsed, not with surprise, with recognition. Adrian felt the room tilt beneath him. You knew. His uncle lowered the paper. Adrian, you knew he survived. Frederick closed his eyes. How long? Still no answer. Adrian stepped closer. How long have you known? Frederick whispered. 46 years. Adrian stared at him. Then came another knock. This one urgent. The butler opened the door without waiting. My lord. Frederick turned. What now? The butler looked at Adrian. Mrs. Hart is leaving. Adrian frowned. Why? She ordered a carriage immediately after hearing about the parcel. Frederick went pale. Adrian was already moving. He crossed the entrance hall just as Evelyn descended the staircase carrying a traveling cloak. Elias and Clara followed with small bags. You are leaving? Evelyn stopped. Yes. Because I received this? He held up the watch. Her expression confirmed it. She knew exactly what it was. Who sent it? I do not know. Mrs. Hart. I cannot help you. You can. She moved toward the door. Adrian blocked her path without touching her. Are those children Edmund Vale's? Her face changed. Not enough to answer him. Enough to make him ask the question that frightened him more. Or are they mine? Evelyn stared at him. For one endless moment. Even the servants stopped moving. Then she whispered, Neither. Adrian's brow tightened. Evelyn looked upstairs toward her children. When she spoke again, there was something close to pity in her voice. The reason they look like you, Your Grace, is because you have spent your entire life believing you were Adrian Vale. Adrian did not move. Evelyn's eyes filled with a secret she had clearly carried far too long. But according to the man who brought those children to my door 7 years ago, she paused. Adrian Vale died before his first birthday. Adrian did not speak. Not because he had nothing to say. Because there were too many questions, and every one of them seemed more impossible than the last. Behind Evelyn, Elias and Clara stood silently on the staircase. Frederick had come out of the library. The old earl stopped when he heard Evelyn's final words. Adrian Vale died before his first birthday. For several seconds, the only sound in the entrance hall was rain against the windows. Then Adrian laughed. It was a short, hard sound. No. Evelyn did not move. No? She repeated. No. Adrian pointed toward himself. I am Adrian Vale. I know what you were told. I do not care what I was told. I have lived 32 years with that name. So did someone else. His expression changed. Frederick stepped forward. Evelyn, this is not the place. She turned on him. Then where is the place, Frederick? The servants immediately lowered their eyes. Nobody called the Earl of Belgrave Frederick in his own hall. Evelyn did. You invited him here, she continued. You allowed this to happen. You knew what those children would see the moment he arrived. Frederick looked ashamed. I hoped there might be another way. There was another way. What? To keep your promise. Adrian's head turned. What promise? Neither answered. His voice sharpened. What promise? Evelyn looked at Frederick. You tell him. Frederick shook his head. You have more right. More right? Adrian stepped between them. I am standing here while the two of you discuss my life as though I am an inconvenient document. One of you will explain this now. Clara suddenly began descending the stairs. Mama? Evelyn turned instantly. The anger left her face. Yes? Are we still leaving? Evelyn hesitated. Adrian watched the children. They were frightened now. Not of him. Of the adults. And that changed something. He lowered his voice. No one is leaving until we understand what is happening. Evelyn looked back at him. That is precisely why we should leave. Because you know the truth? Because I know what truth does to this family. Frederick flinched. Adrian noticed. Again. Always those tiny reactions. They were beginning to tell him more than anyone's words. He looked toward the servants. Everyone out. The hall emptied quickly. When the last footman disappeared, Adrian closed the doors himself. Then he turned. Start with the children. Evelyn's face hardened. They are not yours. You said that already. And they are not Edmund Vale's. Then whose are they? I cannot tell you. Adrian stared at her. You cannot possibly expect me to accept that. I expect nothing from you. Then why do they possess a portrait of a man who looks like me? Because their father looked like you. Who was their father? Silence. Adrian took one step toward her. Evelyn did not retreat. Was he a Vale? Yes. The answer came so quickly that Frederick swore under his breath. Adrian turned toward him. A Vale. Frederick looked away. Adrian continued. My father had 2 brothers living into adulthood, according to every family record. Frederick said nothing. Yourself and Charles. Yes. Charles died unmarried. Yes. Then either every record I have seen is false, or there was another Vale. Evelyn answered quietly. There was. Adrian looked at her. Edmund. She nodded. And he lived? Yes. How long? Evelyn looked at Frederick again. Frederick finally surrendered. Until 8 years ago. Adrian's stomach tightened. 8 years. Not infancy. Not childhood. The man had lived well into adulthood while the family record declared him dead. Why? Frederick moved slowly toward the nearest chair. He suddenly seemed exhausted. Because our father demanded it. Adrian stared. My grandfather? Yes. Why would he erase his own son? Frederick sat. Because Edmund was not the son he wanted. That means nothing. In this family, 30 years ago, it meant everything. Adrian waited. Frederick rubbed his hands together. Edmund was different from us. He hated estate life, hated London, hated titles. He spent more time with gardeners, stable boys, and tenants than he did with people of his own rank. Adrian frowned. That hardly justifies pretending he died. No. Frederick's voice became quieter. But then Edmund discovered something. Adrian felt the trapdoor opening again. What? Our father had been selling portions of Belgrave land secretly. Frederick continued before Adrian could interrupt. Not legally, not properly. He was taking payments from tenant families and promising them ownership, then using the same properties as security for debts elsewhere. Evelyn's expression showed she had heard this before. Adrian had not. If that had become public, it would have destroyed him, Frederick said. Perhaps all of us. So Edmund threatened to expose him. He did more than threaten. He gathered letters, agreements, receipts. Adrian looked toward the wooden box containing Edmund's watch. And grandfather responded by erasing him? First he tried to silence him with money. Edmund refused. And then, Frederick looked at the children. Not in front of them. Evelyn touched Elias's shoulder. Go upstairs. Elias hesitated. Mama, please. Something in her voice convinced him. He took Clara's hand. But before they left, Clara looked again at Adrian. Are you coming with us to supper? Adrian stared at her. A strange question in the middle of disaster. I do not know. You should. Why? She shrugged. Because you look lonely. Then she disappeared upstairs. Adrian remained still. Evelyn watched him. For the first time, something softened in her expression. Only briefly. Adrian turned back to Frederick. Continue. Frederick took a breath. Our father sent Edmund away. Where? Northumberland first, then Scotland. Later, no one knew. And the family was told he died. Yes. Even my father? Frederick hesitated. That hesitation was enough. Adrian's anger returned. My father knew. Yes. For how long? Always. Adrian turned away. That hurt more than he expected. His father had been a cold man, but Adrian had spent most of his life believing him incapable of deceit inside the family. Apparently he had simply been better at it. Why did Edmund not return after grandfather died? Evelyn answered. Because he did not trust any of you. Adrian looked at her sharply. You knew him. Yes. How? She lowered her gaze. He found me when I was 18. Found you? I worked in a bookbinder's shop in Durham. Adrian waited. He came in with a damaged ledger. I repaired it. He returned the next week with another, then another. Something changed in her face. Not romance exactly. Memory. Respect. He was kind, she said, and impossible. He argued about everything. He claimed titles made men foolish. Frederick gave the faintest smile. That sounds like Edmund. Evelyn continued. He eventually told me his real name. Why? Because he needed someone to keep something safe. Adrian looked at the box. The evidence against my grandfather? Some of it. Where is it? I do not know. Adrian stared. You kept it safe without knowing where it is? I did not say he gave it to me. Another locked door. Adrian was becoming tired of them. What did he give you? Evelyn's eyes flicked upstairs. Adrian followed the glance. The children. No, he said slowly. Evelyn's silence confirmed it. Edmund brought you the twins. Yes. When? 7 years ago. They were infants? Only weeks old. Adrian took a breath. And he told you they were his? No. That answer hit harder than expected. Then whose? He would not tell me. You accepted 2 infants from a man who refused to name their parents. I nearly refused. Nearly? Evelyn's voice changed. He was desperate. Frederick looked toward her. You never told me that. No. What happened? Evelyn clasped her hands tightly. He arrived after midnight. He had been traveling for days. He put Elias in my arms, Clara in a basket, and told me that if anyone asked, I was their mother. Adrian's brow furrowed. He expected you simply to agree? He said their lives would become property if the wrong people knew who they were. Adrian glanced at Frederick. What does that mean? I do not know, the Earl said. Evelyn continued. Edmund left before dawn, and never returned? Once. Adrian's eyes narrowed. When? A year later. What did he say? Evelyn looked toward the watch. He said, one day a man might come whose face would answer a question I was forbidden to ask. Adrian felt cold. What question? She looked directly at him. Which veil had been replaced? Silence. Frederick rose slowly. No. Evelyn turned. You knew this was coming. No. I knew Edmund suspected something. I did not know. Replaced? Adrian interrupted. Frederick stopped. Adrian's voice had gone dangerously calm. Explain that word. Evelyn did not answer immediately. Edmund believed 2 babies were exchanged. Adrian's heart seemed to miss a beat. Which babies? One was Adrian Vale, and the other? I do not know. Frederick walked toward the fireplace. This is madness. Evelyn looked at him. Is it? Yes. Then why was there no grave for Edmund? That was our father's doing. Why is Adrian's baptism record written in 2 different inks? Adrian turned. What? Frederick's face went blank. Evelyn saw it. So you noticed that too? Adrian moved toward her. You have seen my baptism record? A copy. Where? Among Edmund's papers. What else was there? A midwife's statement. Frederick shut his eyes. Adrian saw it. You know about that. Frederick did not answer. Adrian crossed the room. What midwife? Her name was Mrs. Crewe, Evelyn said. Adrian looked at Frederick. My mother's midwife? Yes. Where is the statement? Evelyn shook her head. Edmund took it with him. And Edmund died 8 years ago. Yes. So the document is gone. Perhaps. That word stopped him. Perhaps. Evelyn reached beneath the collar of her dress and drew out the pearl pendant. She pressed a tiny catch. The back opened. Inside was not a portrait. It was a key. Small. Brass. Adrian stared. Edmund gave me this the last time I saw him. A key to what? He never said. Frederick stepped forward. Let me see it. Evelyn closed her fingers around it. No. Frederick's expression changed. Evelyn, you have hidden enough. I am trying to protect you. From what? The question hung there. Frederick did not answer. Then Adrian remembered something. The watch. He returned to the wooden box and examined it carefully. E.V. Edmund Vale. But there was a strange indentation inside the lid. He pressed it. A false panel lifted. Beneath it lay a narrow strip of paper. Evelyn moved closer. Frederick whispered, What is that? Adrian unfolded it. 3 words. West Tower. 3rd floor. Frederick's face changed instantly. Adrian looked up. You know what this means? Frederick answered too quickly. No. Another poor lie. Evelyn studied him. The West Tower has been locked since I came here. Adrian remembered. Belgrave's West Tower had always been shut. As a child, he had been told the stairs were unsafe. He had never questioned it. Until now. He held out his hand toward Evelyn. The key. She stared at him. No. Mrs. Hart. If Edmund wanted you to enter that tower, why did he give the key to me? Because perhaps he expected us both to be here. That silenced her. Frederick moved between them. No one is going to the tower. Adrian looked at him. Then I am certainly going. Adrian, you invited me here because you lacked the courage to open this yourself. That does not mean. It means you knew there was something there. Frederick's face crumpled. Yes. Finally. The truth. Small but undeniable. Yes, he whispered. Adrian stared at him. What? Frederick looked toward the ceiling as though he could somehow see the tower through stone. A room our father ordered sealed. When? The night Adrian Vale died. Nobody moved. Evelyn slowly opened her hand. The little brass key rested on her palm. Adrian took it. The anniversary guests had begun arriving by the time Adrian, Evelyn, and Frederick reached the west corridor. Music drifted faintly from the rooms below. Carriages rolled into the courtyard. Laughter entered Belgrave Hall while 3 people climbed a staircase that had not been used in decades. Dust covered the rail. The 3rd floor held only one door. Adrian inserted the key. It turned. Frederick whispered, "Wait." Adrian pushed the door open. The room beyond was not what he expected. Not storage. Not abandoned furniture. A nursery. A preserved nursery. 2 small cradles stood beneath the window. 2. Evelyn stopped behind him. Frederick gripped the doorframe. Adrian walked slowly inside. On the wall hung a faded ribbon. On a shelf sat 2 silver cups, each engraved with a name. Adrian picked up the first. Adrian. Then the second. He wiped away the dust. Another name appeared. Julian. Adrian's breath stopped. "Who is Julian?" Frederick did not answer. Evelyn moved toward an old writing desk. "There is something here." A leather book lay inside. Adrian opened it. The first pages contained feeding times, temperatures, notes from a nurse, 2 infants. Adrian, Julian, born within a day of one another. He turned pages faster. Then one entry stopped him. October 14. Lady Vale refuses to allow the second child removed. Next page. October 15th. His lordship says only one boy can remain. Adrian looked at Frederick. "What does that mean?" Frederick looked close to tears. "I never saw this." Adrian turned another page. October 17. The exchange has been completed. Mrs. Crewe says she will never forgive us. Adrian's hands went cold. Evelyn whispered, "Keep reading." He turned the page. The final entry had been written in different handwriting. Only one sentence. "If anyone finds this book, know that the child raised as Adrian Vale is not the child born to Lady Vale." Adrian stared at the page. His mother, not his mother. His entire life suddenly became a question. Then something fell from the back cover. A folded miniature. Evelyn picked it up, opened it, and went white. "What?" Adrian took it from her. The portrait showed a young man perhaps 25 years old. Dark hair, gray eyes, his face, Adrian's face. But beneath the portrait was a name, Julian Marrow. Adrian stared at it. Evelyn whispered, "That is the man in my blue book." Adrian turned toward her. "The children's father?" She nodded slowly. "Yes." Frederick backed into the wall. "No." Evelyn looked at Adrian. "And now you understand why they ran to you." Adrian could barely hear her. "Julian Marrow, Julie, and for you." A man with his face. A man whose name appeared beside his own in a sealed nursery. A man connected to 2 children upstairs. Then footsteps sounded in the corridor. Slow, deliberate. Everyone turned. An elderly woman stood in the doorway. Adrian recognized her immediately. Lady Margaret, his uncle's wife, the woman whose anniversary celebration filled the house below. She stared at the nursery, then at the book in Adrian's hands. All the color left her face. Frederick whispered, "Margaret." She ignored him, her eyes fixed on Adrian. "You opened it." Adrian held up the portrait. "Who is Julian Marrow?" Margaret began crying. Not loudly. Quiet tears. The tears of someone who had spent decades expecting this moment. Adrian stepped toward her. "Who is he?" Margaret looked past him, toward the 2 cradles. Then she said the sentence that made even Frederick stagger. "Julian Marrow was your mother's firstborn son." Adrian stared at her. "My brother?" Margaret shook her head. "No." Then she looked directly into Adrian's eyes. "He was you. He was you." Adrian stared at Lady Margaret. The words seemed too small for what they had just destroyed. Behind her, music drifted faintly up from the anniversary celebration below. Guests were laughing. Glasses were being raised. Somewhere in Belgrave Hall, a quartet had begun playing. And inside the sealed nursery, Adrian Vale had just discovered that Adrian Vale had never been his name. He looked down at the miniature again. Julian Marrow. The man painted there had Adrian's eyes, Adrian's mouth, even the slight unevenness in one eyebrow. But Evelyn had just identified him as the father of Elias and Clara. Adrian slowly raised his head. If Julian Marrow was me, he looked at Evelyn. Then who is the man in this portrait? Lady Margaret answered. The real Adrian Vale. Nobody spoke. Adrian's fingers tightened around the miniature. Frederick sank into a chair. Evelyn stepped backward. No. Margaret looked at her. I'm afraid so. Evelyn shook her head. Edmund told me that man was Julian Marrow. He was called Julian Marrow. Margaret entered the nursery and closed the door. But he was not born with that name. Adrian felt his heart hammering. Start at the beginning. Margaret looked at him. The real beginning? Yes. She glanced at Frederick. No more protection. Frederick slowly nodded, and Lady Margaret began. 32 years ago, your father was not the faithful husband you believed him to be. Adrian's expression hardened. Margaret continued. Before his wife gave birth, he had become involved with a young woman named Marianne Marrow. Adrian looked toward the miniature. Marrow? Yes, Julian's mother. Margaret swallowed. Your mother? Silence. Adrian did not blink. For 32 years, he had believed Lady Helena Vale had given birth to him. He remembered her hands arranging his cravat when he was a boy, her voice reading beside his bed, her disappointment when he behaved badly, her pride when he became Duke. You are saying Lady Helena was not my mother? No, it was a simple word. It broke something enormous. Margaret continued softly. Marianne gave birth first, a boy. Adrian already knew the next part. Julian, you. The room seemed to shrink. The following evening, Margaret continued, Lady Helena gave birth to another boy. Adrian Vale. Yes. 2 children. 2 mothers. 1 father. Half-brothers born barely a day apart. The diary suddenly made sense. 2 cradles. 2 silver cups. 2 boys with Vale blood. And because they shared the same father, 2 boys who could grow to resemble each other almost perfectly. Adrian looked at Frederick. And my grandfather discovered the affair. Frederick nodded. He knew before either child was born. So why was I brought here? Margaret answered. Your mother became gravely ill after your birth. Marianne had nowhere to go. Lady Helena discovered what her husband had done and insisted the child should not be abandoned because of his father's betrayal. Adrian looked toward the diary. Lady Vale refuses to allow the second child removed. Yes, she wanted me to stay. Yes. For some reason, that hurt differently. The woman who had raised him had known, and she had still loved him. But the diary said only 1 child could remain. Margaret's expression darkened. Your grandfather said that. Why? Because the legitimate Adrian was weak. Adrian frowned. Margaret continued. The physician believed he might not survive infancy. Your grandfather was obsessed with succession. Belgrave had debts. Westmere had political enemies. He believed the family could not endure losing its heir. Adrian understood before she finished. No. He ordered the identities exchanged. Evelyn covered her mouth. Adrian stared at Margaret. He replaced his grandson. Yes. With me. Yes. And what happened to the real Adrian? Margaret looked at the miniature. He was given to Marianne. Adrian almost laughed from disbelief. My mother left with another woman's child? She was given no choice. And I remained here. As Adrian Vale. What happened when the real Adrian survived? That became the problem. Margaret's voice weakened. He grew stronger. Adrian looked at Frederick. So grandfather had replaced a sick heir who did not die. Yes. And instead of correcting it, he buried the truth. Not a child. A name. The legitimate Adrian Vale was raised as Julian Marrow. The illegitimate Julian Marrow was raised as Adrian Vale, and apparently everyone who knew had been frightened into silence. Adrian turned to Evelyn. "The man in your miniature." Her eyes widened as everything rearranged itself in her mind. He was the child sent away. The real Adrian. Yes. Adrian looked toward the staircase beyond the nursery. Elias. Clara. His thoughts stopped. Margaret understood. Yes. Adrian looked sharply at her. "You cannot know what I am thinking." "I can." She glanced toward the miniature. "Those children are Adrian Vale's children." The room went completely silent. Not Adrian, the man standing before them. Adrian Vale, the child born to Lady Helena. The boy whose name had been stolen. The man who had spent his life being called Julian Marrow. Evelyn sat heavily on the edge of the old nursery chair. Edmund knew. Margaret nodded. He eventually discovered the exchange. That was why he investigated the family records. Yes. And the children? Margaret looked confused. "I never knew they existed." Evelyn stood. "Then I know something you do not." Everyone turned. She reached into the pocket of her traveling cloak. "I nearly forgot this." She withdrew an envelope. Old. Creased. Unopened. "Edmund gave it to me the last time he visited." Frederick stared. "You said he returned a year after bringing the twins." "He did. But I told Adrian Edmund died 8 years ago." Evelyn looked at him. "You were wrong." Frederick paled. Evelyn continued. "Edmund disappeared 8 years ago. You assumed he died. He survived long enough to find me." Adrian remembered Frederick's earlier certainty. Another family assumption masquerading as truth. "What is in the letter?" he asked. "I do not know." "Why have you never opened it?" Evelyn turned the envelope over. Across the back were 4 words. "For the 2 Adrians." I never understood what it meant. Adrian took the letter. The seal broke beneath his thumb. Inside were 2 pages. He read silently at first, then stopped. "What?" Frederick stepped closer. "What does it say?" Adrian began again, this time aloud. "If you are reading this together, then the truth has finally outlived the men who tried to bury it." Everyone remained still. The boy raised as Julian Marrow discovered who he was at 24. He wanted no dukedom. He wanted no public scandal. He wanted only one thing. Adrian stopped. Evelyn whispered, "What?" Adrian looked at her. "To know his brother." Her eyes filled. Adrian continued reading. He watched Adrian from a distance several times, but never approached him because he feared destroying the life Adrian had been given. Adrian lowered the page. The real Adrian had known about him. His half-brother had stood somewhere in London, perhaps across a street, perhaps in a crowded assembly room, looking at the man living the life that should have been his, and had walked away. "Continue," Margaret whispered. Adrian read. "Then he married." Evelyn's face changed. "Married?" "Yes." She stepped closer. "To whom?" Adrian continued. "A woman named Sarah Hart." Evelyn staggered backward. "My sister." Adrian looked up. Evelyn's eyes filled instantly. "She disappeared after leaving Durham." Her hand trembled. She wrote twice, then nothing. Adrian looked back at the letter. Sarah Hart was the twins' mother. Evelyn sat down. For 7 years, she had raised her own sister's children without knowing it. Clara's smile. Elias's stubbornness. Small pieces of a sister she thought she had lost. "What happened to her?" Evelyn whispered. Adrian read carefully. Sarah died shortly after the twins were born following an illness. Evelyn closed her eyes. No one spoke until she opened them again. "And their father?" Adrian continued. "The man living as Julian Marrow cared for the children for several weeks, but he had already discovered that someone was searching for Edmund's documents. He feared whoever wanted the old secret buried might eventually find the children. So Edmund took them," Evelyn said. "Yes, to me, because you were their aunt." Evelyn covered her face. Edmund had not chosen a stranger. He had brought the children to the closest family they had left. Adrian turned to the final paragraph. His expression changed. Frederick noticed. What? Adrian reread it, then looked toward the 2 silver cups. What does it say? Margaret asked. The real Adrian died 7 years ago. Evelyn lowered her hands. How? A fever contracted while traveling. No dramatic battle. No grand scandal. The rightful heir to Westmere had simply disappeared from the world under a name that was never his. Adrian looked again at the letter. But one final sentence remained. And this one changed everything. His son lives. Frederick whispered, Elias. Adrian nodded. Evelyn stared. Margaret slowly sat down. Everyone understood the meaning. If the records were corrected, Elias was not merely a child who resembled the Duke of Westmere. He was the son of the man who should have been Duke. Adrian folded the letter. Frederick's voice was barely audible. If this becomes known, Elias may have the stronger claim. To Westmere, Margaret said. Nobody looked at Adrian. Perhaps because they were afraid to. For 32 years, he had possessed a name, a title, an estate, a place in Parliament, an identity. And upstairs slept a 7-year-old boy whose father had been robbed of every one of those things. Evelyn stood. We leave tonight. Adrian turned. No. Her expression hardened. You heard what was said. I did. They will come after those children with lawyers and questions and newspapers, and people who care more about inheritance than whether Elias sleeps through the night. I said you are not leaving. You cannot keep us here. I am not keeping you. Then what are you doing? Adrian looked toward the door. Ending it. Within an hour, the anniversary dinner had begun. Nearly 80 guests filled Belgrave's great dining hall. They expected Frederick to make the first speech. Instead, Adrian stood. Conversation stopped. Evelyn sat near the rear with Elias and Clara. Frederick whispered, You do not have to do this tonight. Adrian looked at him. Yes, I do. 32 years of silence had created this. He would not add another evening to it. I came to Belgrave today, Adrian began, believing I knew precisely who I was. Guests smiled politely. That confidence lasted approximately 30 seconds. A few laughed. Elias grinned. Adrian looked directly at him. I discovered something today about this family. Something hidden for more than 3 decades. Margaret closed her eyes. Adrian continued. I will not give you every private detail. Some truths belong first to those harmed by them. Evelyn stared at him. But tomorrow morning, my solicitors will receive documents concerning the succession of Westmere. A murmur spread across the room. And until those documents are examined, I will make only one declaration. He looked toward Elias and Clara. These children are members of my family. Elias stopped smiling. Clara's eyes widened. They will not be hidden. Adrian's voice strengthened. They will not be treated as scandal. He looked around the room. And no person who hopes to remain welcome in any house connected to me will speak of them as though they are anything less than innocent children who inherited the consequences of decisions made before they were born. The room became completely silent. Then Adrian did something nobody expected. He walked away from the head table, across the entire dining hall, toward the twins. Clara looked at her mother. Elias stood. Adrian stopped before him. The boy looked suddenly nervous. Am I in trouble? Adrian smiled. No. Are you my papa? The question struck the room like a bell. Adrian crouched so they were eye to eye. No. Elias's face fell slightly. But, Adrian continued, your father was my brother. The boy stared. A brother you never knew? Yes. That is sad. It is. Elias thought about this. Then asked the question only a child would ask in a room full of adults worrying about dukedoms. Does that mean you are our uncle? Adrian looked at Evelyn. Then at Clara. Then back at Elias. Yes. Clara immediately left her chair. She threw her arms around his neck. Well, that is almost as good. Laughter broke through the room. Even Margaret laughed through tears. Elias hesitated for approximately 3 seconds. then joined his sister. And Adrian found himself kneeling in the middle of an anniversary dinner with 2 children hanging from his shoulders. Exactly as they had when he arrived. Only now he understood why it felt strangely natural. 6 months later, the matter of Westmere was settled. The truth was entered into the family record. Adrian publicly restored his birth name, Julian Merrow Vale. But the legal question proved less simple than anyone expected. The old exchange, the false registration, the secret marriage of the true Adrian and Sarah Hart, and decades of uncontested succession produced months of argument. Julian surprised everyone by refusing to fight for the title. If it belongs to Elias, he told the solicitors, then preserving it for myself would make me no better than the men who started this. Eventually, the claim was recognized. Elias Vale became heir to Westmere. Because he was still a child, Julian remained steward of the estate until he came of age. The newspapers expected humiliation. Instead, they found something they could not understand. A man relieved. Julian had lost a title he had carried his entire life. Yet for the first time, he possessed something that truly belonged to him. His own name. Evelyn and the twins remained at Belgrave for a time, before moving to a smaller house near Westmere. Julian visited constantly. Far more constantly than necessary, according to Frederick. One afternoon, almost a year after the anniversary, Julian sat beneath an old oak tree while Elias attempted to teach Clara chess incorrectly. Evelyn approached carrying a book. "The blue one?" Julian asked. She smiled. "The blue one." She handed it to him. Inside was the miniature that had begun everything. The portrait of the real Adrian Vale. Julian studied his brother's face. The man he had never met. The man whose life he had unknowingly lived. "He knew about me," Julian said. "Yes, and chose not to take anything from me." Evelyn sat beside him. Perhaps he believed a brother was worth more than a title. Julian watched Elias arguing with Clara. Then he was wiser than either of us had the chance to discover. Clara suddenly ran toward them. "Uncle Julian." He still turned slowly when he heard that name. Not because he disliked it, because after 32 years of being called Adrian, Julian still felt like a gift. "What is it?" "Elias says when he becomes Duke, I have to bow to him." Elias shouted from beneath the tree. "I said only at important ceremonies." Clara folded her arms. "I shall never bow." Julian looked at Evelyn. "Definitely a Vale." Evelyn laughed. Then Elias came running. He stopped in front of Julian. There was something in his expression. Something familiar. Not his face. Something deeper. "Uncle Julian?" "Yes?" "When I become Duke." The boy hesitated. "Will you still stay?" Julian's smile disappeared. He understood the question. Elias had lost parents he could barely remember. Names had changed. Homes had changed. Adults had whispered around him. The boy was not asking about Westmere. He was asking whether people stayed. Julian stood. He placed one hand on Elias's shoulder. "The first time you saw me, you ran into my arms because you thought I was your father." Elias looked embarrassed. "I remember. I spent 32 years believing that was the strangest thing that had ever happened to me." Clara giggled. Julian continued. "But perhaps you were simply early." Elias frowned. "Early? You thought I belonged to you before I knew I did." The boy smiled. Julian drew both children closer. "So yes." He looked at Evelyn. "I am staying." And for the first time in the long history of Westmere, nobody in the family needed a false name to belong. The old Duke had arrived at Belgrave Hall expecting an anniversary. He left without the identity he had brought with him, without certainty, eventually, without even his title. But whenever people later asked Julian Merrow Vale whether discovering the truth had cost him everything, he always gave the same answer. No, because the day 2 children mistook him for their father was the day he finally discovered his brother, his mother, his real name, and the family that had been waiting for him all along.